The opinions expressed in the following programs are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of Rogers nor Rogers TV.
Hi, and welcome to Politically Speaking, Election 2022 edition. My guest today is Gventer, who is the candidate for the New Democratic Party here in Bruce-grey-owensound. And Karen, welcome. Good to see you today.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Now, right off the top, your name is a familiar one. You're a seasoned campaigner, a seasoned candidate. Let's remind people a little bit about yourself. What do we want to know about Karen Giventer?
Well, I live in South Bruce Peninsula. I've lived there for 20 years, and I have two kids. One is going off to college in the fall, and one is in grade 9. I am doing this because I believe that it's important for people to have a voice at Queen's Park, and I would like to be that voice.
Sure. And as I recall, in the last provincial election, you actually took second place, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's right. I had 24% in the last election, which is a pretty good showing. Yes,
the NDP has done exceptionally well, or did exceptionally well in the last election. And it was quite interesting to see that, which is that wasn't, I would have to say that's an unusual result for this riding.
It is unusual. I think people are starting to see that things can be different, and they're not really happy with their lives the way they are right now. I'm talking a bit about this election, but affordability and that things can change. So I've heard that at the doorstep as well. This election, there's a change going on.
Now, why did you choose to run? I mean, you work, you've got obviously got children, but you work a full-time job, but you decided to toss your hat in. What was the reason?
I think it's important for people to have someone to represent them. I've realized that my whole life I've dedicated to public service in one way or another. For example, I work in the public service area, and I do a lot of social justice work. So it's natural to want to have a career in public service as an MPP and representing people.
So to you, this would be sort of like the next step.
That's right.
Sure. Now, you mentioned that you've been campaigning door to door. Bruce-grey-owensound is a large riding. I mean, I've heard it's about the 4th largest in all of the province of Ontario. Have you been able to get out into the various parts of the community?
I'm working through it. We've been to Durham, we've been to Wyerton. We have plans to go to Hanover and Chesley and Paisley and Meaford, and so reach the various corners of the riding as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, just out of curiosity, where's your campaign headquarters?
We're located in Owen Sound at 747 2nd Avenue East. It's near the City Hall in Owen Sound.
Yeah, I was going to say it's about halfway down the block from City Hall. Okay. So, and that's where you're, what is it about that area around City Hall? That's the third political party that's got an office or a riding or a campaign office right within that couple of blocks.
Yeah, I think it's affordable and a good location.
Sure.
For all of us, I'm guessing.
Either that or it's the water or something's in the air. Who knows? I won't go there. So what for you is the critical issue for Bruce-grey-owensound?
There's actually a few critical issues that are coming up at the doorstep. One is, of course, inequity and affordability. And another one is healthcare. And the third one is the climate emergency. Those are all things that I'm hearing a lot about.
What are people saying about those things?
Well, for affordability, they're struggling to make ends meet. The gas prices are skyrocketing, the food prices are going up, housing prices are unreal. So that's definitely a concern, and of course, something that the NDP would take action on. The healthcare, people are concerned that they can't get family doctors. There's a backlog of surgeries and procedures due to the COVID-19. We're short on healthcare workers, so we need 10,000 PSWs and 30,000 nurses, the experts tell us. And then the climate emergency is, we see more floods and fires and extreme weather events, and people are recognizing that we really need to take that seriously and take action against the climate emergency.
Now, let's talk a bit about healthcare, because, as you said, the needs are great. What is your party's platform to deal with some of this particular urgent issue? Let's say healthcare.
Well, for one thing, we would clear the backlog of surgeries and procedures. We can expand the hours that operating rooms operate, for example. And as I mentioned, we would hire 10,000 PSWs and 30,000 nurses and help retain them. We would get rid of Bill 124, which caps the increase in wages, which in essence is actually a decrease when you include inflation. So we would scrap Bill 124 so that we could retain the healthcare workers that we have.
Are there any incentives that you would have, particularly PSWs? I mean, all of our healthcare services are in desperate need of PSWs, for example. Are there any incentives that your party would offer to recruit people into those particular vocations?
Yes, absolutely. One of the challenges with PSWs is it's a very important job, of course. We call them heroes, and yet they are so desperately underpaid. So we would increase their pay by $5 an hour for PSWs. And like I said, make sure that nurses are paid a fair increase for each year.
I know C-124 has been, or not C-124, Bill 124 has been a major thorn in the side of the nursing profession as well. You would repeal that?
Yeah, absolutely. We would scrap Bill 124.
Okay. And what about other healthcare issues such as physician recruitment? I mean, there's a lot of people without a doctor. Does your party have a plan for that as well?
Yeah, we would make sure that we recruit more healthcare professionals. One of the things we can do is to increase the number of nurse practitioners that people will often see as their primary healthcare professional.
So let's switch it up about switch topics a little bit and ask. You said that affordability and particularly gasoline prices were something you were hearing at the door. What would your party do to make life more affordable in Ontario?
For one thing, we would get the Ontario Energy Board to cap the gas prices so that we're not being gouged at the pumps. That would also have a positive effect on our food prices, because the food is being transported by gasoline or diesel vehicles for the most part. Another thing we would do is tackle the housing affordability. That's apparently one of the top priorities that is on Ontarians' minds right now, is the housing, the prices of housing. And there's a number of things we would do with that. For one thing, we would put in rent control. We would also make sure that if someone moves out of a rental unit, the next person who moves in would pay the same as that previous tenant. We would give incentives to first-time home buyers to help with their down payments.
Now one of the things that has also been a big issue is Highway 413. Now, that's not an issue for this riding directly, but certainly the idea of highway construction, which 413 is basically the highway that would be the next ring of highway links to running roughly from Highway 400 all the way, or Bradford, sorry, 404, all the way over to 403 and in the Hamilton area. What's your party's position on 413?
We would get rid of that plan. We believe that it goes through too much farmland and natural land, and there are other, like there's the underused 407, so other alternatives for people. We also would invest in public transit, and I've heard as a statement, if you build it, well, they will come. So if you build more roads, then they're just going to get full with cars. But if you increase the public transit, then people will have that opportunity to use public transit, and it instead helps the environment, and we don't need the roads. And we don't need the extra roads.
Right. Now, Mr. Del Duca has announced that he will reduce transit fares for a period of time to $1 a ride, and then subsidize public transit. Does your party have a similar position on public transit like that to make it affordable?
We definitely would need to subsidize it and help municipalities operate their public transit to make it affordable for people. It is important for the climate emergency that we get people out of individual gas guzzling cars and into public transit.
Well, speaking of cars, one of the issues of transportation is the fact that we're an oil-dependent society right now, and one of the solutions has been to subsidize the purchase of electric vehicles. Is that part of your party's platform?
Yes, absolutely, it is. We would help people with the electric vehicles, as well as helping transform the manufacturing process from the gas producing, the production of gas using vehicles, and to change that to electric vehicles. Plus, I'd remind people that the Doug Ford Conservatives tore out the charging stations. So we would re-implement the charging stations so that people who have electric vehicles would be able to charge them, and help them put in charging stations in their homes again so that they can make use of electric vehicles that they purchase.
So you sounds like there's a pretty comprehensive plan to move people over towards electrically powered vehicles.
Yes, there definitely is. It's very important, again, for the climate emergency. And the other thing is, if we can help people switch over to electric vehicles, then the gas prices have less of an impact on people because people aren't using the gas then.
Now, what about other sources of energy or fuel for vehicles? Here in Owen Sound, we've got Hydrogen Optimized, which is developing hydrogen-powered, or developing the technology around hydrogen power. Has your party made any statements about other sources of energy, such as hydrogen or fuel cells, those kinds of things?
There is some discussion about biogas, for example, to help, especially in an agricultural area, that you can use the waste to create gas that then can power vehicles.
Sure, and as regular viewers of this program will know, we have talked at length with Mayor Burley of Georgian Bluffs about the biodigester that sits just outside of Owen Sound. And while that's not a provincial issue, certainly it is a local issue where we can, and we can take a deep dive into that one, because that goes right back to organic recycling and source separation and all kinds of other issues as well. So does your party support those kinds of initiatives?
We definitely support like increased diversion from landfills. Things like biodigesters, it depends on the circumstances. In some circumstances, they make the most sense. In some circumstances, it's better to do composting, more traditional composting, for example. It depends on the situation and which is better for the environment in that particular situation. But also increasing recycling and diversion from landfills would be important.
What about nuclear power? I mean, that's one of the foundations of the economy of this community of the two counties, Bruce and Grey. Has your party taken any positions on the use and development of nuclear power?
In general, we don't support new nuclear until we can figure out a way to deal with the waste. The waste is such a big issue. We would invest in renewable energy, and that would help us. And another thing that's really important is conservation, because when you conserve the electricity, then you don't need as much electricity. And there's a lot we can do in the conservation realm for electricity.
Sure. It's a really interesting area for us to dare I use the pun, mine, because it's something that we've certainly got to keep at the forefront of our thoughts and our thinking. Because hey, we've only got one world. We got to take care of it in some way. What about things like pipelines, which are not necessarily an issue here, but there are pipelines such as Line 5. There are that feed Ontario, Western Oil. There are natural gas pipelines that run all over this province. But does the party support the development of pipelines?
It would depend on the situation. One really important thing is to be working with First Nations on a government-to-government level, and making sure that we are consulting with them and taking their desires into account. A lot of pipelines conflicts have arisen because the First Nations were being overridden when the pipelines could have been moved, not going through their land, for example. So it depends on the circumstance, really. And on the other hand, there's cases that we need pipelines. If we're switching to natural gas, for example, which is still a greenhouse gas, but may not be as bad as fuel oil, for example.
Yeah, and what about developments such as the Ring of Fire in Northern Ontario? That's potentially some of the biggest mineral resources in the world. And these are the kind of mineral resources that are desperately needed for electric vehicles. Does your party have a position on the Ring of Fire development?
Yeah, it's similar to the natural gas the pipelines, that it's absolutely crucial that we work with the First Nations, because in the Ring of Fire, there is a lot of First Nations communities. So we need to make sure that we're working with them and that they get benefit from any development that's going on there.
Mm-hmm. Does the party comment on the environmental impact of the mining which may occur there?
That's something that we need to make sure that we're mitigating as much as possible as well. Sure.
Well, let's go back here for a moment to some of the other issues of, dare I say it, affordability. Just prior to the election call, the Ontario government signed a $10 a day daycare agreement with the federal government. And there was much hooing and hawing over that. And the fact that Ontario was the last last province which got on board is something that some have noted. What's the NDP's position on childcare?
We have advocated for affordable childcare for many, many years, and are happy to see the development of $10 a day daycare. We would make sure that it is implemented very quickly. The other side of childcare is making sure that our childcare workers are paid adequately. So we would make sure that our registered early childhood educators made a minimum of $25 an hour, and other childcare employees make a minimum of $20 an hour. They're looking after our children. They're looking after those that are going to be in our future. We need to make sure we compensate them fairly, and the government would, an NDP government would help with that too.
Well, what about the idea of using contract workers or workers that are not full time? This has been an issue, I know, in the whole area of early childhood education, daycare, people who have, and in healthcare, in long-term care, people have a part-time job and no benefits.
Yeah, and that's definitely an issue that the NDP would tackle, to have more people be able to work full-time, not have to cobble together 2 or 3 jobs in order to make a living, and be able to get the benefits that they need.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it's more encouragement of more full-time work.
Yes, absolutely.
And speaking of work, what's your platform on minimum wage?
We would raise the minimum wage to $20 an hour by 2026, so $1 each year. We recognize that that could have the small businesses might be concerned with that. We would work with small businesses to make sure that they get assistance to help with that transition. Small businesses are the backbone of our community, so we need to look after them as we raise the minimum wage to what's more of a living wage. $15 an hour is not a living wage anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it wasn't that long ago that $15 an hour was the goal, and now the provincial minimum is $15.50. But as you say, a living wage, if I'm not mistaken, in Grey Bruce is somewhere around $19 an hour, give or take. I haven't seen the most recent figures, but so you're saying you want to move it to $20 an hour going forward.
Yeah, and we would tie it to inflation so that it doesn't get further and further behind like it did, like it had been in the past, which is one of the problems that we're trying to do, catch up from the many years of the Liberals and the Conservatives not increasing the minimum wage.
What about people who are on OW and ODSP, Ontario Works and Ontario Disability Support Program? They have not had increases in what they receive in years.
Yes, and that's a shame. They make below poverty, and that is not fair, not reasonable. The NDP would immediately increase the ODSP by $20%, and in the second year would double it, so that they're getting much closer to a fair amount of money each year that they can live on. Especially ODSP, they hardly get enough money to be able to pay rent, and we've already talked about how the housing prices are going up and up, so it's even getting worse. Yes,
what you're really proposing is to reverse the cuts of 25 years ago, which reduced ODSP and OW by 20%, 21%, and then moving forward.
Yeah, that's right.
Now let's swing back to housing affordability. Does the party's platform have any comments on things like planning and municipal practices, or anything like that, on how to make not housing more affordable, but housing more available?
Yeah, we would change the zoning so that the zoning isn't all dedicated necessarily to single family units, and allow there to be multifamily units and assortment of housing developments in areas.
So you would want to see a variety of housing built in a community as opposed to single family dwellings alone.
That's right. That gives more availability of housing, different types of housing, and helps with the infilling, especially if you have a mix of apartments, for example, mixed with single family dwellings, then that also can help with urban sprawl. we're not stretching out and out into our agricultural land as much.
Well, which is an interesting point. What about the conversion of agricultural land to residential land? We're starting to see that a lot, particularly in the southern part of the riding, where in Southgate, there's massive housing developments. We're starting to see that here in Owen Sound, although that land is zoned for residential development. You just drive up Highway 10, you see a lot of new development there. What does your party say about the conversion of farmland to residential?
It's a concern when we're losing farmland. The farms, they say farmers feed cities, right? The farms are where we get our food from. And when you convert farmland to residential, you're losing that ability for it to produce food for us or food for animals that then we eat. So that's something that we would want to really look at. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So it would be part of the conversation with if the NDP were to form a government.
Yes, definitely part of the conversation.
Sure. Now your leader is Andrea Horvath, and she is crisscrossing the province. She's doing it in the traditional bus, I believe. Is she planning to be here in Bruce-grey-owensound at any time? Do you know?
I don't believe so. It's because of our geography, it's a challenge to get here because we're kind of off to the side or above everywhere else. So she doesn't naturally pass by.
Right, or pass through.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. So you're on your own. If you're going to win this, you're going to be doing it by the shoes on your own feet.
Yes. Although we do have support from the provincial party through advertising and the provincial debates and that kind of thing. Sure,
Karen. We've got a couple of minutes left. Is there any last thought you'd like to leave with our viewers?
Just that things can be different. People are really concerned, as I said, about affordability. And part of that is because of the decisions that the governments have been making, the Conservative government most recently and Liberal government before them. They've been looking after their buddies, not looking after the people of Ontario. And we need a government that looks after the people of Ontario.
Okay. Well, Karen, as always, it's a pleasure to have you on Politically Speaking to talk to you about your political aspirations, and we will see what happens the night of June 2nd. And again, best wishes to you, and I'm sure we'll talk again. Thank you.
Thank you, and I would like to ask everyone to vote for me, Karen Gventer, and the NDP.
Thank you very much, Karen, and thank you, friends, for being a part of Politically Speaking. I'm David Shearman. We'll talk again.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
My Uncle Cheney was one of over 150,000 Indigenous children that were taken to residential schools between the 1800s and 1996. My uncle ran away from school, wanting to get home to his mom and dad, and sadly he didn't make it and died of exposure. When Gord Downey found out about my late Uncle Cheney's story, he wrote Secret Path, a series of poems that became an album, then a graphic novel, a documentary, and a concert. Gord met my family, and together we formed the Gord Downey and Cheney Winjack Fund. Together, we are sharing Secret Path and other reconciliation resources with legacy schools, setting up legacy spaces across Canada, and hosting events like Secret Path Week to inspire all Canadians to engage in reconciliation. Before he left us, Gord asked us all to do something.
You're gonna figure it out.
Will you join us? Together, we can make Canada a better place.
Hi, I'm David Shearman, host of Politically Speaking. Join me for my next show. As part of our Elections 2022 coverage, we will have Karen Gventer and Joseph Westover. Politically Speaking on Rogers TV.
The opinions expressed in the following programs are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of Rogers nor Rogers TV.
Hi, and welcome to Politically Speaking. I'm David Shearman. We're continuing our coverage of the Ontario 2022 election with an interview with Joseph Westover. Joseph is a representative, a candidate for the Populist Party of Ontario. And the Populist Party of Ontario is a relatively new party in this province. So we'll have a conversation with Joseph, who is a candidate, as I said, for Bruce-grey-owensound. Joseph, welcome. Good to have you with us.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm well.
It's good to be here.
Now, I was going to the Populist Party of Ontario, and can I call it the PPO? Just for the
Exactly.
okay.
Yeah.
The PPO is a new party. Where did it come from, and who is the founder?
Okay, so what we are is, and as I would say, not to tie the PPC to us, but that's who we are. We're the PPC in Ontario. Not that the PPC is going to condone us and jump on board. You know, they don't really want to tarnish the federal, right? Because we're a new party. They don't want to get that going, but we are PPC members. We are, some are even PPC regional managers of Ontario. And that's really who started it, was Jim Torma. Got on this because we see that the PPC is failing miserably for Ontario. We only got 400,000 votes from Ontario. So we're the blue, or the we're the conservatives that are the purple wave, and we're continuing to come into Ontario to have that influence of the PPC.
And just to be clear, the PPC is the People's Party of Canada, and
Correct.
The national leader of the People's Party of Canada is Maxime Bernier, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, so this is kind of like, this is a provincial organization with under the umbrella.
That's what it is, but not legitimately as far as something that the PPC wants to stand up yet and say. All right. So, but yeah, I'm a PPC candidate for Mississauga East Cooksville on the candidate of record. I went in the federal election. And so most of us are candidates in this party. So
Sure.
That's where we're from.
Sure. So where do you live?
I live in Kilsyth in Ontario.
Yeah. And what kind of work do you do?
I'm a general contractor. I've been doing it for about 7 years. And so I build houses and do renovations. That's what I do.
I'll bet you're busy in this time of these days.
You know, it's very difficult to campaign and do any work at all. Very hard. So yeah, it's busy as heck.
I'm sure. Well, at least you can see both sides of the housing issue. That's for sure.
I certainly can.
Sure. What attracted you to the position of the PPO from the beginning?
Okay, well, first, like I said, I was attracted to the PPC because of what it stood for. It wants to get us back to being Canada and a sovereign nation, and not a globalist state, which Trudeau is leading us into. So it's promoting some very good principles, the PPC does. And the PPO now has been, like, we've all had our experience running for the PPC. So now what we're doing is we're refined. The PPO is the PPC more refined, okay, to come into Ontario. And what we are is we see the downside that not just the Trudeau government, but what the PC governments federally have done, and anyone else involved, and how the NDP's joined with Trudeau and all that stuff, right? We also see what's going on provincially, not in our province only, but other provinces as well. And we have a plan to fix it. So I have a daughter. She's wonderful. Her name's Camille. I want her to grow up in a free society. I don't want this communist rule coming upon us in this globalist agenda where we lose our sovereignty and our freedom of choice to do what we want in our own nation.
What would your vision of a free society look like?
It would look like what the preamble of the Bill of Rights says. The supremacy of God. It's the supremacy of God and the spiritual and moral value system that comes out of that supremacy that dictates what laws we then have in our nation, with free men and free institutions, and with the family as the backbone of society and respected. Mm-hmm. That's what it would be. That's what it looks like to me.
Without wanting to get into too deep a theological argument or conversation, what God are we really talking about?
There's only one God that ever was founded in this nation. That was Christ. So our laws. That's correct. Our laws are based on Moses. You can look it up in jurisprudence, right? Other judges have mentioned it, where Britain, America, and Canada are all based on Moses. And out of that came Christianity. And Christianity still upholds the law of Moses. But it also, with it, holds mercy. So for when you've done wrong, right? So out of those spiritual moral values, you then have a God we sing to in a national anthem who will keep us free. Our land glorious and free. It isn't any just God out there. It's only one God, and that's the God it's been. We did the Lord's Prayer in schools and over top of every assembly where government was concerned and all that. And they've removed that. And as they've done so, they did it to our own peril, because as soon as they did so, it changed our spiritual and moral value system that dictates what laws we have. And now we have perversions upon perversions going on in this nation. And our children are pretty much being taught complete immorality, immoral stuff. And then you've got on top of that, the family unit is being destroyed by this. So I want to restore all that back to the way it was. And that's why people, by the way, in this nation are flocking to Canada, all right, is because of those Christian spiritual and moral value system that keeps you free. They don't have it in their nations. They have oppression and tyranny. And so they flee and they come here. And then our government is betraying us against what their role is to be. All right. They betray us and they change our morals and our spiritual value system. And and here we are in a real bad, confused state, and right on the tip of tyranny.
So that's the overarching principle. But what kind of policies and practices would you want to see, or would your party want to see in Canada, should you be successful, or in Ontario, should you be successful?
Well, I would certainly suggest we'd stop propaganda. There wouldn't be any such things or any role of government or media involved in that anymore. We wouldn't be promoting the payment from government to media in any way, shape, or form. That couldn't be done. You'd have to survive on your viewers, and that's it. So that would be one thing to look at. Borrowing would be another. Borrowing continually to and promoting the idea that we're going to borrow money from some soon-to-be dictator if we get into too much debt to them, so that we can help the poor. Those concepts don't work, because that's why we have inflation. And inflation, this concept of philanthropy that this government constantly has, is to borrow we need housing. We got a problem with housing. There's no housing. Well, you know what? We've got a problem with immigration. Our federal government is immigrating now, going up to 450,000 immigrants per year. That is almost double what it is now. We don't have the housing for what it is now. That's like Nova Scotia moving in every year. All right. Our culture is changing because of it. The Canadian culture and the Canadian value system, who's going to hold on to it when we actually have maybe the Arabic or the African or the Chinese or all those will outnumber the Canadians in no time with this rate of immigration. And so it has to be cut down so that it's a sustainable one for what we have even in this nation. Not to mention, we need to be having our own children again and stop using all the sexual devices and stuff like that to limit our ability to reproduce, that they've come up with. So I think I would promote those types of things. I'd also be promoting in educational system, the stopping completely of any type of sexual grooming of the children. It's disgusting what's going on. It's going way too, there's just no reason for anybody under certain ages to know those topics at all. All right. And it seems to be that it's just gone haywire and it's not an appropriate thing. So that's got to stop. And in place of such things, we would teach our children about Canadian history and how it became free. And then we teach them in that same venue, constitutional law, and then what it's based on and how this country is to remain free and how they also will have the knowledge to keep it free. Should we see a government step out of line again, they could all stand up and know what their rights are and have that type of thing. So there's a couple things. There's lots of we can't actually make any promises on what we're going to build or, we're going to build 70,000 million old age homes and we're going to hire 1 billion nurses and I can make all the lies up you like, but I don't know the budget. Do they? I know we're in debt. And as soon as you borrow more money to help anyone out, you make the cost of living go up for everybody. And so eventually, I think the whole goal here is of the 4 lines of government we have that are common to people is to make sure that the middle class become the poor. Once you have inflation too high, the middle class can't afford the cost of living. You won't be able to afford your home. So you become a renter. Therefore, you have to have Canadian funded housing, which everybody wants to do, right? Hey, let's go and rent. The proud deal of renting, right? That's what we all want to be as renters. That's not anything we promote. We promote ownership. We want you to own your own home, have the cost of living come down so you can do that. All right. Make sure that inflation is taken care of, that the borrowing stops when we don't have it. We're going to have to just stand still for a while till we do. We're going to have to implement into Ontario big business. We're going to have to cut out climate change. It's not anything real. And it certainly isn't anything real for Canada. Canada is on the negative where carbon emissions come into play. We absorb other people's emissions. All right, there's been tests done in history already about that, and we absorb it. They talk about climate change, about how Al Gore went around teaching about it. And he had, I think when he first started, he said 10 years, the polar caps they'll be all melted and gone. Well, you know what? Did you look? Because they're back stronger than the day he mentioned they would be melted in 10 years. They didn't melt in 10 years. They did get smaller a little bit, but now they're back even bigger than they were then. Also, they said the polar bears would go extinct. The polar bears are flourishing and well beyond what they were back then. So we've got a cycle of Earth that goes up and down and does its thing. And false science wants to jump in and tell you things that just aren't real. And they want to shock you. And climate change is really a global issue if it really is true. And therefore, you need a global government, a one world government dictating over Canada, which undermines our sovereignty. We're not for that. It's a lie. We're not for giving up our sovereignty at all. We're Canada first. We're Ontario first. That's what we are. There's also where COVID's concerned. No basis for any type of travel bans. Trudeau never put in a state of emergency, except for when the convoy went. So the reality is Trudeau is doing illegal mandates. He's denying fundamental rights to Canadian citizens, Ontarians included, okay, without any position to do so. All right. If he had have invoked the Emergencies Act and said, hey, we're in a plague, we got this, then maybe he might have some grounds in some areas, but he didn't do it. And he has no grounds whatsoever to be invoking or not invoking, but denying anybody their inalienable rights. And then Doug Ford, who has completely gone with those ideas that Trudeau has promoted, vaccine mandates, vaccine IDs. This is Doug Ford. This isn't Trudeau. Trudeau did not do this in Ontario. Doug Ford, who is supposed to be the other end of the scope of Trudeau, he's the one who implemented the mask mandates, the vaccine passports. All those things got to go. They're not real, and they can't be foisted on anybody by law, by the Supreme Law of Canada through Section 26. You find all other rights in Canada that aren't mentioned here are still protected by the Charter, and you'll find it in the Canadian Emergencies Act of 1985 that they have to look to the Canadian Bill, the Canadian Charter, and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. And when you get to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, Article 4.1 talks specifically about a state of emergency. When a plague comes on your nation, what rights cannot be suspended? And one of those rights happens to be your life, just so you know. They can't kill you all of a sudden because you got COVID, all right? And then on top of that, this Article 7 of that is also upheld, which says no torture can be done, no inhumane behavior can be put on a person. And then it says, in particular, no one is to be subjected to medical or scientific experimentation without free consent. To deny people their rights of going to a theater, going out and doing anything else, shopping, whatever it is they want to try and lock you down on, is an absolute violation of the Charter. And they need to be sued. The government needs to be held to account. And we need to know and recognize that the Trudeau government and the PC government and the NDP and the Green Party are one party, and they are a globalist party, and they're bringing tyranny upon us. That's it. They're not here to set us free. They're not here to promote Canada and its value system. They're undermining it on 100 different ways. I couldn't even get into so many of them. But anyway, we would reverse the COVID policies. We're working on rewriting the Charter as well to block holes that are in it. For instance, the legal right to life. There's no legal right to life in Canada. It's a fundamental right, and they got it in a legal section as a legal right. That's an absolute undermining of what the Canadian Bill says. So there's just a few. Now, I'm not at all exhausted on it. There's lots more that could be said on. If you brought up other topics, I'm sure I could just go and go and go. So, but there's a lot.
Let's do that. Let's do that, because I was interested in the party's platform. Bruce-grey-owensound does have a significant agricultural component to it, and your party has some agricultural positions on it. Do you want to talk about your positions on agriculture?
Well, we'd love to get farmers so they're actually able to make money again, right? So, and not be raising the price on everybody else, because it's also a problem. So we've got gas prices that are an issue, diesel, right? For farmers, it costs everything else, right? Then you've got the farmer grows the food. He's got to be able to sell it and make it marketable after that. And then you've got truckers and their diesel fuel going up. And then it comes to the market and we're screwed, right? For the pricing is just so high on everything now. So we got to keep the price of gas down. And I honestly promote dealing with Alberta and making Canada produce its own oil and its own gas from out west and getting it to Ontario that way. That would be something that we would do. We also have an interest in banning all GMOs, that they won't be in Ontario anymore.
That's GMO seeds and plants.
Yes, that's correct. That it would just be, we're going to get rid of them. And whatever that takes to get rid of them, we're going to have to do it. And we'll restart with what we have and what God made. And we'll be produced by that. As far as other things, I don't know if you have pointed questions about farmers. No.
Well, I was going to say that one of the platforms of the PPC has been around supply management, and supply management has been a very strong issue in Canada. What's your party's position on supply management? Things like milk quotas, egg quotas, those kinds of things.
Honestly, I think that I don't know that we can manage any of it. We have to have people that want to do it, right? I don't know that and if they want to do it, then they have to be able to make money at it. So, I mean, this has to be a lucrative business for them. Otherwise, it's of no use, right? And people just quit, or they just can't afford to do it. And that's our issue. I think on every issue you ask me, I'm going to tell you that the cost of living has to come down for everybody. And so I don't care if it's about nursing, homes, whatever it is, helping the poor, helping just the middle class. The cost of living has to come down in Canada. We don't raise the price of minimum wage. No, minimum wage, okay, needs to be able to afford life. That's what we need. So we need to bring the housing prices down. We can't have a house being $1.2 million. Okay, that's a joke. It was just like that same house was maybe $300,000-$400,000 before. That's a joke that it's up to $1.2 million now. They're doing it on purpose, this inflation, to make sure that we can't own a home as the middle class. And for instance, if you go to Toronto, you'll have other cultures moving in, and you know what they do? They don't mind paying the $1.2 million or whatever it's going to cost, because they put 4 people in one room at $350 a bed. That's not our culture, to live with 4 people in a little bedroom. A 10 by 10 bedroom's got 4 beds in it. That's not our culture. It's not the Canadian culture. But they don't mind doing it, and they end up getting $1,400 per bedroom. Where we were renting before everything, 1 bedroom was $400 for one individual. Okay, so that's the how things are changing so drastically from other cultures coming in, and our culture is just being annihilated by it. And then we can't grab a hold of anything. This is affecting the farmers because of that. The price of land goes up. I know farmers around Owen Sound. I know the Bothwells, right? I know the Thomases. I know the Dailies. All right. I know what's going on with them. They've ceased buying up land. They would buy more land and keep growing crops. But even so, they sell to China because China pays more than Canada for the crop. So they're not even farmers for Canadians. Do you understand? Like, that's got to stop too. We need to be producing our own food so that they can actually make money off of us, right? And have everything brought down so that our community is self-sustaining, instead of, oh, well, we're just shipping all our food out and then we're all out of food at the grocery stores and everything else, right? So, I mean, we got to bring things together like this. And like I said, I can't make any promises on anything until I know the budget. And once I know the budget and how much we're in deficit, then we have to know what businesses we're going to have to get in here to make the money so that we can get everybody working again, have good jobs, good paying jobs, that type of stuff, and get this economy going. So
you touched on something earlier in your commentary, Joseph, about digital ID. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, the digital ID, it's a quite a nefarious thing. So first off, passports, like the vaccine passport, was illegal on so many fronts. Just with our normal laws. There's a privacy law that means that you don't have to declare your vaccine status to anybody, all right? On top of it, doing PCR testing is illegal, all right? You can't force that on anyone either. And so then we've got businesses firing people based on not doing a test or not having a vaccine, right? Or not wearing a mask. All of them medical experimentation, just so you know, all right? All of them have laws against them in Canada. So the problem with the digital ID is that will be wrapped up in it as well as your health info will be in there. Your criminal record would be in there. Everything will be in there. And even it'll also be including your bank accounts. It'll be attached to that. And so what the problem is with it, the real problem is that if you don't conform to what Trudeau wants, we'll just use him as an example because he's the authority right now. So if Trudeau wants, just like he did with the convoy, he shut down their accounts. You'll have this happen to you too. Toe the party line or we're going to close you down. They're not just censoring free speech online. They're doing it in real life. All right. So that you can't go to a protest anymore, which is a violation of a human right. We're allowed to assemble and protest. It's protected by the charter. No, apparently it's not when Trudeau's in power. And it's not when Doug Ford is, because he's made Bill 100 go right against a lot of the protesting ability of Canadians and give severe punishment against it. So the digital ID is really a control issue. And if you want to look to something, you can look to China. They do the same thing over there. And they do that. They will cut you off from food. You won't be able to buy anything if you don't walk their walk and talk their talk. Okay? So your family, you won't be able to provide for them. You won't be able to do so many things. You won't be able to go out. You won't be able to buy gas, whatever, right? You're not going to pay your bills, nothing. You're going to lose everything you have because of a digital ID that somebody controls other than you. We need to be controlling our ID. We need our bank accounts and everything. That's what privacy is about. It's not the government's business, and they don't need to know. And certainly the world certainly doesn't need to know what Joseph Westover or anyone else's bank account is, or what I own, or anything else, or how many family members there are, or if I've got some disease or don't, right? It's none of their business. It's private.
I noticed as part of that, the platform on information technology where the digital ID is raised is a concern over the rollout and use of 5G, and 5G is the technology that cell phone companies are using for the next generation of their cell phones. And can you comment on 5G at all?
Sure. I'm not an authority on it, but I've certainly heard some authorities talk about it. So I haven't proven it myself, so it's hearsay what I'm saying. But by their testimony, a lot of COVID symptoms are caused by 5G. Mm-hmm. So whether we have a COVID for real or not, we don't know specifically, because the PCR test has been overruled by the CDC and said it gives too many false positives. All right. So we're using something that's failing anyway to prove something exists. So, I mean, some people have run it under tap water and it comes out positive. So, I mean, it doesn't help anything to have those testing and use those results to say we have a pandemic or not. Right. So that's an issue. And then you go further. We bring around a possibility that maybe it's because we're rolling out 5G that everybody's having these symptoms more and more, and they're just going to make sure we get used to it as COVID or something. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know whether it be true or not, if that's the case. I hear it's supposed to be more direct, better power system to kind of, function your signal, right? But do we need it? No, we don't. All right. We don't need to be broadcasting all these signals at higher and higher power through our bodies. I really don't think it's going to be healthy. So that's really where I would sit.
Well, Joseph, believe it or not, we've actually run out of time. And I really appreciate the conversation, or should I say you're sharing your thoughts, because the PPO is a new party to this province. And we look forward to perhaps our paths will cross again. So best wishes in the election. And thank you for the conversation. And thank you, friends, for being a part of Politically Speaking. I'm David Shearman. We will talk again.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.
Hello everyone, your host Antoine Hashim here on the couch, and welcome to season 8. Yay! 8 seasons, and we've got a lot of awesome guests coming up, so keep watching.
Looking for the best way to get the Major League Baseball games you want to watch? Roger